Bella. The papers trembled slightly in my hands as I sat alone in the study. The moonlight seeped through the heavy curtains, bathing the desk in silver light, making the black ink of Alpha Mason's name stand out even more. His name, tied to Layla's in every damning transaction. Payment after payment, each one like a nail hammered into the coffin of her deceit. I leaned back in the chair, the air in the room suffocating despite the cool night breeze. Layla and Gray. It's all connected, I whispered, my voice breaking the silence. Saying it aloud didn't make it easier to believe. My wolf stirred within me, her presence steady. You know what this means, she said, her voice calm yet commanding. You've found the truth. Now, what will you do with it? The answer should have been simple. Expose them, make them pay. But I couldn't stop the memories flooding back of Gray's cruelty, his need to control and crush anyone who defied him. His actions had nearly broken me, but I'd survived. And now I'd uncovered his newest game, using his illegitimate daughter Layla as a weapon against me. The chat logs were still open on my laptop, Gray's words cold and calculated, Stella's replies dripping with venom and desperation. Father, she had called him, her messages laced with a twisted mix of admiration and resentment. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Layla wasn't just some random pawn in Gray's game. She was his illegitimate daughter. I sucked in a breath, the air feeling too thin, too sharp. I closed my eyes, trying to still the storm of thoughts. Gray's her father, I murmured to myself, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. This wasn't random. None of it was. I swallowed hard, my fingers tightening around the edge of the desk. It had never been random. Layla's calculated moves to undermine me, her manipulation of Max. It was all part of Gray's larger scheme. Suddenly it all made sense. Her ability to manipulate Max, the resources she had at her disposal, the unwavering arrogance. Gray had been pulling the strings all along, using Layla as his tool. And now I was staring at the proof. I thought back to Gray's injustice toward me, the countless ways he'd tried to break me. I could still feel the echoes of those betrayals, the scars they'd left on my soul. But now, staring down at the evidence in front of me, I felt something I hadn't expected, clarity. This wasn't just about me anymore. Gray's cruelty, Layla's deception, it was a web of lies spun for power and revenge. But why? What did they stand to gain by targeting me, by targeting Max's pack? My wolf stirred again, her voice steady and insistent. This is your moment, Bella. You've been waiting for this. You have the proof. Now make them pay. And now I have proof. But proof wasn't enough. Not yet. I needed to ensure this truth reached the right people. I picked up my phone and called Max. He answered on the second ring, his voice sharp with concern. Bella? What's going on? I hesitated for only a second before responding. I've uncovered something big. You need to see this. There was a beat of silence, then his voice firmed. I'll be there in 10 minutes. I set the phone down, staring at the pile of evidence on my desk. My wolf rumbled quietly, her voice tinged with satisfaction. You're doing the right thing. He needs to see the truth. When Max arrived, his presence filled the room like a storm rolling in. His usual calm was fractured by the tension in his jaw, the way his eyes scanned my expression before settling on the papers I handed him. He read in silence, his face darkening with each passing second. His shoulders stiffened, his hands gripping the pages so tightly I thought they might tear. This can't be real, he said finally, his voice low. It is, I replied, crossing my arms. Every word, every payment, every lie Layla told you, it's all here. She's Gray's daughter, Max. She's been working with him from the start. His jaw clenched, and for a moment I thought he might snap the papers in two. Instead, he set them down carefully, like they were a bomb about to go off. I trusted her, he said bitterly. I let her into the pack, let her... God, I almost... He didn't finish, but I knew what he meant. Layla had been angling for more than just his trust. She'd wanted power, and she'd nearly succeeded. You couldn't have known, I said, my voice softer now. She's been playing this game for a long time. He looked up at me then, his eyes blazing with determination. What do you want me to do? I didn't hesitate. Expose them. The pack needs to know the truth. Gray and Layla deserve to face the consequences of what they've done. He nodded once, sharply, and grabbed his phone. What followed was nothing short of electric. Max stood in the pack's council chamber, the camera of his phone propped up against the edge of the table. He adjusted his stance, took a deep breath, and began the live stream. I watched from the edge of the room, my arms crossed over my chest. The screen showed the growing number of viewers, the comments flooding in as the pack tuned in to their alpha's unexpected broadcast. His voice was steady, but the undercurrent of anger was unmistakable. "Members of the pack," he began, his eyes locking onto the camera as if staring directly into each viewer's soul. "I've called this meeting because I've uncovered something that affects all of us, something I cannot and will not ignore." He laid out the evidence methodically, his tone measured yet brimming with fury. He detailed the transactions, the chat logs, the ties between Layla and Gray. He didn't spare himself either, admitting how Layla had deceived him, how she'd manipulated her way into the pack. "I was wrong to trust her," he said, his voice heavy with regret, "and I take full responsibility for allowing her into our ranks, but I refuse to let her lie poison this pack any longer." He paused, his eyes glinting with a steely resolve. "Effective immediately, Layla is stripped of all rank and privilege. She is banished from this pack, and Alpha Gray." His lips curled into a snarl. He will answer for his crimes. The comments erupted in a flurry of shock and outrage. Max didn't look away from the camera. "We are stronger than their lies," he said firmly, "and we will rise above this." When the stream ended, the silence in the room was deafening. Max set his phone down and turned to me, his expression weary but resolute. "It's done," he said. Before I could reply, my phone buzzed. Layla's name flashed on the screen, and I couldn't stop the smirk that tugged at my lips. "This should be good," I murmured, answering the call. The moment I pressed the phone to my ear, her voice exploded through the speaker. "You bitch!" she screamed, raw fury lacing every word. "You think you've won? You think you can get away with this?" Her curses and threats poured out like venom, but instead of anger, I felt satisfaction curling through me. "You should have known better than to cross me, Layla," I said, my tone calm but laced with steel. "You underestimated me. That was your first mistake." Her response was incoherent rage, but I didn't care. "I'll never let you go, Bella. I'll get you back." Her rantings and screams were music to my ears. I smirked, scoffing before I ended the call with a flick of my thumb, tossing the phone onto the desk. My wolf chuckled softly, her presence warm. "She'll try to fight back," she warned. I smiled faintly, the weight on my shoulders easing just a little. "Let her try," I said. "I'll be ready." This wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for now, I'd won. And that was enough. Layla. When Max walked through the doors of the pack house, I knew I was in trouble. I tried to make a hasty exit, maybe come back and apologize when he's calmed down a bit, but he was too quick. He strode towards me, his expression cold and unforgiving. "Max, please," I begged, falling to my knees as tears streamed down my face. "I'm sorry. I know I made mistakes, but I never meant to hurt you or the pack. You didn't mean to banish me, right? I'll do anything, just please forgive me." But Max's face remained impassive, his eyes glacial. When I finally ran out of words, he spoke, his voice firm and detached. "Layla, I reject you as my mate," he said, his words cutting through me like a knife. "You're no longer welcome in this pack." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Rejected, banished. The words echoed in my mind, refusing to sink in. I stared up at Max, searching for any sign of hesitation or doubt, but his expression remained resolute. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "You can't mean that. We're mates, Max. We're meant to be together." But he just turned and walked away, leaving me kneeling on the floor, my world shattered. The same fate I'd once inflicted on Bella. Memories came flooding back, and I felt a pang of guilt and anger. I remembered the day Bella caught us together, the shock and hurt on her face. And then, Max's rejection of her. He didn't even wait for her to leave the room before showing his tongue down my throat. Now I was the one kneeling on the floor, begging for forgiveness. The irony wasn't lost on me. I felt a bitter taste in my mouth, a shout of rage and hurt building in my throat. How could he do this to me? Didn't he remember what we'd shared? The secrets, the lies, the schemes. I thought we were in this together. Panic started to set in as I stared blankly at the floor. My mind was a jumbled mess of fears, doubts, and uncertainties. Where would I go? Who would take me in? Gray's pack? I hadn't lived there my whole life, and now I was banished from my own pack. The thought sent a wave of nausea crashing through me. My breath came in short, ragged gasps, my chest constricting as if a vice was squeezing the air out of me. My lungs burned, my breathing coming out as wheezes with each panicked inhale. My vision began to blur, colors smearing together like watercolors on wet paper. The room spun around me, a maddening whirlwind of colors and shadows. I stumbled, my knees buckling beneath me. My legs felt like jelly, unable to support my weight. I crashed to the floor, the impact jarring my bones. My palms scraped against the cold hardwood, the pain a distant echo in my mind. My stomach churned with a sickening sense of dread. Bile rose in my throat, threatening to spill out. My heart pounded in my ears, a deafening roar that blocked out all other sound. I was drowning in my own fear, unable to escape the crushing weight of my mistakes. Everything around me grew dark and fuzzy, like a painting smeared by a wet brush. I tried to call out, but my voice was trapped in my throat. My vocal cords strained, but only a faint whisper escaped. My vision narrowed to a tiny pinprick, the world around me fading into darkness. I slowly opened my eyes, grogginess clinging to me like a damp shroud. At first, I didn't know where I was. White walls stared back at me, sterile and impersonal. The smell of antiseptic hung heavy in the air, making my stomach turn. As I turned my head to the side, I saw the machines beeping and whirring around me. Wires snaked under my skin, connecting me to the devices. A nurse stood beside me, scribbling notes on a clipboard. When she noticed I was awake, she looked up, a mixture of surprise and professionalism on her face. "Welcome back, Layla," she said softly. "Don't try to move, okay? You need to rest." I tried to speak, but my voice came out hoarse and barely audible. The nurse held up a hand, forestalling me. "The doctor will be with you shortly. Just relax for now." I nodded weakly, feeling a wave of exhaustion wash over me. I lay alone in the hospital room, surrounded by the sterile smell of antiseptic and the soft beeping of machines. Regret washed over me like a cold wave. I never imagined I'd end up like this, rejected, broken, and confined to a hospital bed. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes as I thought about the choices I'd made. I'd pinned all my hopes on marrying an alpha, on being the perfect mate. I'd lost myself in the process, neglecting my own desires and aspirations. Maybe, just maybe, if I'd taken a different path, things would be different. Maybe if I'd collaborated with the witches like Mabel did, I would have gained more power, more autonomy. Maybe my life would be perfect now. But no, I'd gambled everything on Max, and I'd lost. Now I was left to pick up the pieces of my shattered dreams, lying in this hospital bed, wondering what could have been. I wanted to scream out loud, but I really didn't have it in me. My thoughts were interrupted by the door swinging open. A man in corporate wear, complete with a crisp white shirt and tailored trousers, walked in. Over his attire, he wore a white coat, the ID tag reading Dr. Thompson. "Good morning, Layla," he said, his voice cheerful. "I'm your doctor. I see you're awake now." Before I could respond, Max walked in behind the doctor. My heart skipped a beat as our eyes met. I couldn't decipher his expression. Was he here to forgive me or gloat? Dr. Thompson began his examination, his hands moving with practiced ease. He checked my pulse, my blood pressure, and shone a light into my eyes. I felt like a specimen under a microscope. After what felt like an eternity, the doctor stepped back, a satisfied smile on his face. "You're doing great, Layla. You just need to rest for a bit." He turned to Max, who stood by the window, his eyes fixed on me. "She's good to go whenever you're ready." Max's gaze never wavered. "I'm here to make sure she leaves the pack straight from the hospital," he said, his voice cold. "I want nothing to do with her." My heart stung at his words. "Why are you here then?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Max's eyes flashed with anger. "Because I know you can be slippery. I'm here to ensure you don't cause any more trouble." When the doctor slipped out, our argument continued to escalate, with Max's words cutting deeper with each passing moment. I felt like I was drowning in his indifference, suffocating under the weight of his disdain. And then it hit me. Max didn't care about me. Not really. I was just a nuisance, a problem to be solved. The realization was crushing, leaving me breathless and lightheaded. I felt myself swaying, my vision blurring at the edges. Just as I thought I was about to pass out, I saw Max's eyes widen in pain. For a few fleeting seconds, his mask slipped, and I saw a glimmer of something else. fear, maybe, or surprise. And then he fell. Face flat on the ground, his body limp and unresponsive. I stared shocked as a figure emerged from behind him. I stared shocked as Harper emerged from behind Max's lifeless body. Harper, Mabel's friend, was supposed to be human, but the person standing before me was unmistakably different. My eyes scanned Max's body on the floor, and Harper's face, searching for any signs of blood or injury, but there were none. It was as if Max had simply collapsed. Magic, I realized, my mind racing with the implications. Harper was involved with the witches, or maybe even a witch themselves. "Layla, what are you doing here?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Fear crept up my spine as Harper's eyes locked onto mine. "I heard your wish, Layla," Harper said, their voice low and mysterious. "I heard you wanted to collaborate with the witches, just like Mabel did, and I'm here to grant your wish." My fear began to dissipate, replaced by a spark of hope. Revenge, I thought, my heart racing with anticipation. I wanted revenge against Max, against the pack that had rejected me. "Do you really want revenge, Layla?" Harper asked, her eyes glinting in the dim light. I nodded, my voice firm. "Yes, I want revenge." Harper's face broke into a wide smile. She walked over to the bed, placing a hand on my shoulder. A strange sensation washed over me, like I was being sucked into something. And then, everything went dark. When I opened my eyes again, I found myself in a dimly lit room. Fire torches flickered on the walls, casting eerie shadows on the stone floor. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and something else, something herbal. I sat up, looking around in confusion. Where was I? But the desire for revenge still burned within me, a fire that Harper had ignited. I was ready to do whatever it took to get my revenge, to make those who had wronged me pay. Harper appeared beside me, taking my hand and leading me forward. As we walked, the room brightened with each step until we were at an altar of some sort. Right on the altar was a symbol, big and contained in a carved wooden circle, a serpent coiled around a staff, its body intricately detailed with tiny scales and ridges. The staff itself was adorned with tiny, glowing runes that seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy. As I looked around, I spotted Mabel praying at the altar. Harper, standing beside me, followed my gaze. "This is where all your problems will be solved, Layla," she said, her voice filled with an air of mystery. I turned to her, curious. "What do you mean?" I asked. Harper's eyes seemed to gleam in the dim light. "You, Mabel, and we're all connected," she said, her voice low and mysterious. "We all have bloodlines linked to the Ancient Ones." Mabel rose from her prayers, her eyes shining with an otherworldly intensity. "And I have the power to unlock those ancient potentials within us," she added, her voice filled with conviction. Harper began to walk around me in slow circular motions, her eyes fixed on mine. "The power of the Ancient Ones comes at a cost," she said, her voice low and hypnotic. "Sometimes that cost is one's own life." I felt a chill run down my spine as Harper's words hung in the air. Fear crept in, making my heart racing. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Harper stopped in front of me, her eyes gleaming with an otherworldly intensity. "The power we seek is not to be taken lightly," she said. "It demands sacrifice, and sometimes that sacrifice is one's own life." I took a step back, my mind reeling with the implications. "I don't want to die," I said, my voice shaking. "I didn't agree to this because I wanted to risk my life. I wanted revenge, that's all." Harper's expression remained unreadable. "Revenge comes at a price, Layla," she said. "Are you willing to pay for it?" I was beyond scared now, my fear giving way to anger and desperation. "I don't want to die," I shouted, my voice echoing off the walls. "You're all crazy! You're just using me for your own twisted purposes." I hurled insults at Harper and the others, but no one responded. They just stood there, watching me with an unnerving calmness. My rage reached a fever pitch, and I started to flail my arms and legs wildly. But despite my struggles, I felt myself being lifted off the ground, suspended in midair by some unseen force. The next thing I knew, I was being pushed into a cage, the metal bars closing around me with a loud clang. I spun around, but there was no one near me. It was as if the magic itself had trapped me. The cage was small, with barely enough room for me to stand. I paced back and forth, my mind racing with fear and anger. Harper's voice cut through the air, calm and authoritative. "Assemble in a straight line," she commanded. To my surprise, a line of people formed in front of the cage, their faces expressionless. There were more people than I had noticed before, all of them standing at attention like soldiers. Mabel stood at the front of the line, her eyes fixed on me with an unnerving intensity. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized I was trapped, at the mercy of these mysterious and powerful women. As I stood there, trapped and helpless, I felt a strange, tingling sensation coursing through my veins. It was as if my body was being rewritten at a cellular level, my DNA unraveling and reweaving itself into a new, monstrous form. My bones began to crack and shatter, the sound echoing through the air like the snapping of twigs. My muscles convulsed, contracting and releasing in a rhythmic, spasmodic dance. My skin itched and burned, as if it was being stretched to its limits and beyond. I tried to scream, but my voice was lost in the cacophony of sounds emanating from my own body. My vision blurred, and I felt myself losing consciousness, falling into a dark, abyssal void. As I plummeted into the depths of unconsciousness, I heard Harper's voice, her words echoing in my mind like a sinister prophecy. "The question is, what kind of monster will emerge?" she said, her tone dripping with anticipation, her words hanging in the air like a challenge or a promise. And with that, everything went black. Bella. The room felt smaller than usual, the air thick as if the walls themselves were closing in. I sat on the edge of the bed, legs crossed, fingers twisting the hem of my sweater until the fabric was stretched and wrinkled. My chest felt heavy, like a weight was pressing down, making it hard to breathe. Kai stood near the door, leaning against the frame with his arms crossed over his chest. His sharp gaze pinned me in place, silently urging me to speak, but he didn't push. He never did. That made it harder somehow. "It's not just the bond," I murmured, barely able to force the words past the lump in my throat. My voice sounded brittle, as if it might shatter under the strain. "It's me, what I am." Kai's posture softened, his shoulders relaxing as he straightened and took a step toward me. He didn't rush, but I could feel the concern rolling off him like waves. When he finally sat down beside me, the mattress dipped under his weight, and the faint scent of pine and smoke surrounded me, as grounding as it was intoxicating. "What do you mean?" His voice was gentle but firm, like he was ready to catch me if I started to fall apart. I exhaled shakily, trying to organize my thoughts. My hands refused to stay still, moving from my sweater to my lap to clutching each other. "I've been thinking about what Harper said," I admitted, staring down at my hands as if they held the answer to everything. "About the bloodline. About what I am." "You mean the ancient werewolf blood," he said, his voice low. I nodded, feeling the tension coil tighter in my chest. "It's more than just lineage, Kai. I can feel it, like it's waking up, like it's changing me." My throat tightened, the words catching. "Harper knows how to control it, how to control me. And if she does—" "You're afraid you'll hurt me," he finished for me. I swallowed hard and nodded again, my eyes finally meeting his. There was no judgment in his gaze, just a quiet intensity that made my chest ache. "I'm afraid of what I could become, what I could do to you, to us." He reached out, his fingers brushing mine. I let him take my hand, his warmth seeping into my skin, but it didn't stop the tremor in my fingers. "You won't lose yourself, Bella," he said firmly. "Not to Harper, not to anyone. Do you hear me?" "But you don't know that," I whispered, my voice breaking. "What if I'm not strong enough? What if?" I looked away, unable to finish the thought. He shifted closer, his grip on my hand tightening just enough to pull my attention back to him. "Then I'll be strong enough for both of us," he said. "You're not doing this alone, Bella. You don't have to carry this by yourself." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that his strength, his resolve, could somehow protect us from everything that was coming. But deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't something he could shield me from. I closed my eyes, leaning into the warmth of his presence. "It's not just Harper," I admitted quietly. "It's the others. The packs. If we go to them, if we ask for their help, they'll see me for what I am. And they might not trust me any more than I trust myself." Kai's hand moved to my chin, gently tilting my face toward him. When I opened my eyes, his were steady and unyielding, full of a conviction I couldn't quite summon in myself. "They'll see what I see," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "A woman who's fought for everything she loves, who's stronger than she realizes. They'll see your heart, Bella. And if they don't, then they don't deserve to stand with us. His words hit me like a blow, unraveling the knot of fear in my chest just a little, but the doubt still lingered, like a shadow I couldn't quite shake. What if it's not enough? I asked, my voice barely audible. He leaned closer, his forehead resting against mine. His breath was warm against my skin, and the steady rhythm of his heartbeat was a lifeline in the storm of my thoughts. "It will be," he murmured, "because you're enough. You've always been enough." The lump in my throat grew, but this time it wasn't just fear. There was something else, something softer. I blinked back the tears threatening to fall, unwilling to let them win. "We'll start with Ralph and Luther," Nathaniel said, his voice steady and sure. "We'll go to the border, talk to them, and take it one step at a time, together." "Together," I echoed, the word fragile but full of hope. For a long moment we stayed like that, his forehead pressed to mine, his hands grounding me in a way I didn't know I needed. But then his touch shifted, his fingers brushing against my cheek, trailing down to my jaw. "Kai," I started, but my voice faltered as his other hand moved to my waist, pulling me closer. "You've been carrying too much for too long," he said, his tone low and full of something that made my breath hitch. "Let me take some of it, Bella. Let me take care of you." His hands were warm against my skin, the heat of his touch spreading like wildfire. I felt my pulse quicken, my body responding to him even as my mind struggled to keep up. I barely had time to catch my breath before his lips found mine, soft but insistent, a question and an answer all at once. The storm inside me stilled, replaced by a different kind of heat, one that chased away the shadows and left only him. When he pulled back, his gaze was molten, and the corner of his mouth curved into the faintest smile. "You're mine, Bella," he murmured, his voice rough and full of promise. I barely managed a nod, my heart pounding as he leaned in again, his lips brushing against my ear. "And I'll fight anyone who tries to take you from me." The words sent a shiver down my spine, and before I could respond, his hands moved again, trailing over my bare skin and igniting every nerve in their wake. I gasped, my thoughts scattering, and when he gently pushed me back onto the bed, my mind was already spinning. "I love you, Bella, the things you do to me, my love." There was a trembling in his voice that threatened to undo me this very instant. "Kai." I grabbed the back of his neck and pulled him for a kiss. The minute our lips touched, fireworks exploded. I sighed into his mouth as our mouths found a rhythm, a soft dance where the music was our need and desperation for each other. "God, Bella, you are so beautiful." He trailed a kiss down my jaw. "So brave." Another one on my neck. "So strong and powerful." Then another on my collarbone. I was melting under each kiss. What was he doing to me? It was soft, sweet, not rough and harsh. He was telling me how much he loved me with his words. "I love you," he confessed as he kissed me, losing himself in the feeling of being in me, with me, Bella. The morning air was crisp, the kind of cold that bit at your skin and seeped into your bones. The sky was painted in muted grays, heavy clouds hinting at a storm that hadn't yet arrived. Kai and I walked side by side through the quiet packhouse courtyard, the frost-covered ground crunching softly under our boots. The calmness and trust between us was unspoken but palpable. After last night's conversation with Ralph and my father and Kai's help, I managed to sleep. My thoughts that had been consumed by Harper, the ancient bloodline, and the vague, looming threat of her growing pow washed away because of him. But now, everything started becoming louder in my head. Kai's hand brushed against mine, a subtle grounding gesture that reminded me he was there. I gave him a small, grateful glance before refocusing on the task ahead. Ralph and his mate, Luna Amelia, were waiting for us in the main hall. The pack's Alpha and Luna were a striking pair. Ralph, my brother, with his lean, commanding presence, and Amelia with her regal bearing, her long auburn hair framing sharp features and piercing amber eyes. She radiated the kind of quiet strength that made you want to follow her without question. "Bella," Ralph greeted as we entered, his voice steady but laced with concern. His gaze flicked to Kai before settling back on me. "What's so urgent that you needed both of us first thing in the morning? Are you okay?" Amelia stood beside him, her hands clasped neatly in front of her, her gaze curious but guarded. Kai stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "It's about the prophecy Harper is trying to manipulate. and the strange activity on the border. Amelia's brows furrowed. Prophecy? I exhaled slowly, stepping in to explain. There's a prophecy tied to the ancient bloodlines, Ralph. Harper believes it will give her unimaginable power if she fulfills it in her favor. That's why she's targeting us. Ralph's jaw tightened, his sharp green eyes narrowing. You think this prophecy has something to do with the monsters we've been dealing with? That's exactly what we think, Kai replied. But we need to know more before we can confirm the connection. Amelia exchanged a glance with my brochure, her lips pressing into a thin line. The border has been unusual, she admitted. The attacks have increased, not just in frequency, but in ferocity. It's as if something is driving them, pushing them to test our defenses. They're not normal anymore, Ralph added grimly. Father's been leading warriors to fend off wave after wave of attacks. Some of the creatures are rotting, decayed, but still moving. A chill ran down my spine at his words. Rotting? I echoed, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded. They're not like anything we've seen before. It's as if death doesn't apply to them. Kai frowned, his hand instinctively brushing my back. That sounds like dark magic, he said, his tone grim. I swallowed hard, my mind racing. Ollie's dream, the one he'd told me about before we left, flashed vividly in my memory. There was a woman. She used to come to Alpha Luther's park. Mabel was there, and she turned into a big, scary wolf. This might be connected to Layla, I said, the realization hitting me like a punch to the gut. Layla? Seraphina's brow arched. She has the abilities to amplify people's powers, I explained. Ollie had a dream about her, about monsters like the ones you're describing. I think she's somehow amplifying Harper's reach. Ralph's expression darkened, his fingers tightening into fists. You think Layla is responsible for what's happening on the border? Not just her, Kai said. But if Harper is using Layla's powers to corrupt or reanimate these creatures, then this is only the beginning. Amelia's amber eyes flicked between us, calculating and sharp. What do you need from us? We need to return home, I said. Ollie's ability to dreamwalk might be our best chance at getting answers. If he can connect with Layla or see what Harper is planning, we might be able to get ahead of this. Ralph hesitated, his jaw working as he processed the information. Finally, he nodded. Fine. But if you find anything at all, you tell us immediately. No delays. Agreed, Kai said without hesitation. Amelia reached out, placing a hand on Ralph's arm. Be careful, she said softly, her eyes locking on mine. The border isn't the only place that's dangerous right now. I nodded, the weight of her warning settling heavily on my chest. We will. The journey home was tense, the silence between Kai and me broken only by the occasional crack of branches underfoot. The closer we got, the more a sense of unease began to settle over me. Kai must have felt it too, because his jaw was clenched tight, his eyes scanning the forest as if expecting something to jump out at us. When the pack house finally came into view, relief surged through me. But that relief was short-lived. The moment we entered, one of the betas ran toward us, his face pale and his breaths coming in sharp gasps. Alpha, Luna, what is it? Kai demanded, his tone sharp as he stepped forward. The beta's wide eyes darted between us, panic written all over his face. It's Ollie. He's gone. My heart stopped. Gone? He went out early this morning, the beta stammered, his voice shaking. Said he wanted some fresh air. But when we checked the perimeter, there was no sign of him. It's like he just disappeared. I felt the world tilt beneath me, my legs threatening to give out. Kai's hand shot out, gripping my arm to steady me, but his face was as pale as I felt. What do you mean fresh air? He is sick. He'd disappear? I inhaled sharply, the world spinning around me. What? Did he say anything? Kai asked, his voice cold and controlled. The beta shook his head. No, but one of the patrols found tracks leading toward the woods. They weren't alone, Alpha. Someone else was with him. Harper, I whispered, my voice trembling. Kai's grip on my arm tightened, his jaw clenching. Get the warriors ready, he ordered. We're going after him. The beta nodded and ran off, leaving us alone in the entryway. My mind was spinning, panic clawing at my chest. Kai, what if we're too late? We won't be, he said firmly, his eyes blazing with determination. We'll find him, Bella, no matter what it takes. I wanted to believe him, but the image of rotting monsters and Ollie's cryptic dreams wouldn't leave my mind. The shadow of Harper's influence was spreading, and I feared we were already too deep to escape. Bella. The house was unnervingly quiet when Kai and I stepped inside. I couldn't shake the eerie sense that something vital had been ripped away. The air, usually alive with Ollie's laughter or the faint strains of his humming, felt cold and stagnant. My heart tightened as I glanced at the small table near the door where he always left his shoes in a messy heap. Empty. Kai's hand brushed mine as he closed the door behind us, the faint click of the lock echoing through the silence. The beta said he disappeared during our meeting with Ralph and Amelia, he murmured, his voice strained, low. I could hear the tight control in his tone, but his fists clenched by his sides told me how much he was holding back. He blamed himself just like I did. After everything Ollie had been through, after knowing he could have everything, it was all just snatched away from him like it didn't matter. Like he didn't matter, and I just couldn't bear it. I couldn't lose him. This, us, what we could have become. I nodded, swallowing hard. There has to be something he left behind. Ollie couldn't just vanish without a reason. He would have left something. He's a smart kid. I know he is. The words felt hollow, as if I were trying to convince myself. But deep down, a dark knot of fear coiled in my stomach. We made our way upstairs, the creak of the old wooden steps amplifying the pounding in my chest. His room felt different before I even stepped inside. The door was slightly ajar, the faint scent of sage and lavender wafting out. A calming combination I'd given him to help with his dreams. Pushing the door open fully, I froze. There it was, the mark. Scrawled in dark, jagged lines on the far wall above his bed was a crude totem, a circle with the snake coiled around a staff I recognized immediately. Harper's puppets had been here. I felt the blood drain from my face as the realization struck. She'd infiltrated deeper than any of us had imagined. All packs, even ours. My knees almost buckled beneath me, but Kai's steady hand on my shoulder kept me upright. Damn it, he hissed, stepping closer to the wall. This mark, it's not just a calling card. It's a message. She's taunting us. Or warning us, I said bitterly, my voice cracking. My mind raced, replaying every conversation, every dream Ollie had shared with me over the past few weeks. What had he seen? What had Harper wanted with him? Ollie's room was exactly as we'd left it, yet it felt hollow, like a stage set for a life that had suddenly vanished. The walls were painted a soft, welcoming blue, scattered with the constellations Ollie had loved so much. Glow-in-the-dark stars were stuck haphazardly to the ceiling, his attempt at recreating the night sky he often stared at with wide, curious eyes. His bed, a small frame shaped like a racing car, still had the covers rumpled from his restless dreams. And then there were the toys. I couldn't breathe as my eyes fell on them. There was the wooden train set I'd found at the market last month, now arranged in a neat circle on the floor. Next to it was the stuffed wolf he never went anywhere without, its fur still shiny, but whispered what it could have been if it had years of tight hugs and whispered secrets. But it was the corner of the room that made my chest cave in. The shelves there were lined with books and games, all the little things I'd bought for him in moments of giddy excitement. A stack of new storybooks with bright, colorful covers. The art supplies I'd planned to surprise him with. The tiny astronaut helmet I couldn't resist buying after he told me he wanted to explore the stars one day. All the plans I'd made, the afternoons we'd spent painting silly pictures or reading together under the canopy of his bed, suddenly felt like ashes in my hands. I reached out blindly, gripping the edge of his desk to keep myself upright as the memories swirled around me. My vision blurred as tears welled up, threatening to spill over. He was supposed to be here, I whispered, my voice trembling. My throat burned as I choked back a sob. He was supposed to. My legs gave in just like my heart was threatening to do to the sheer force of the pain I was feeling, and I would have hit the floor if Kai hadn't caught me. His arms wrapped around me, strong and steady, holding me together when I felt like I was falling apart. Bella, he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. He pressed his cheek against my hair, his breath warm against my temple. I've got you. Breathe. I shook my head, the sobs breaking free despite my best efforts. I can't, Kai. I can't do this. I bought all these things for him. We were going to. My voice cracked, and I clutched at his shirt, desperate for something solid to cling to. He didn't try to shush me or tell me it was going to be okay, because we both knew it wasn't. Not until we found Ollie. Not until this nightmare was over. Instead, he held me tighter, grounding me in his presence. "You're not alone," he said softly, his words like a lifeline. "We'll get through this together. I swear it, Bella." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to hold on to that hope. But as I looked around Ollie's room, at all the little pieces of the life we'd built for him, I felt like I was breaking in ways I couldn't put into words. "I just want him back," I whispered, my voice so quiet it was barely audible. I wanted to give him the world he deserved, but it was just too much to realize that he was gone, that he might be gone. How did emptiness feel? This was it. It had just been a short while since we met him, but it made no difference. What he went through meant he deserved to be loved, and now... Kai nodded, his jaw tight. "We'll bring him back, no matter what it takes." For a long time we stayed like that, the two of us clinging to each other in the midst of the storm. Because if we didn't hold on, I wasn't sure I'd ever find my way back. We pulled away when Kai was sure I wouldn't break down anymore. What would I do without Kai? He meant everything to me. He was my rock and strength. Kai moved to the bed, sifting through the disheveled sheets and pillows. His movements were sharp, focused, but I could feel his fear. It matched mine. "He left something," I said, stepping forward, refusing to let my panic swallow me whole. Ollie always left something. The diary. I found it tucked beneath his pillow, the black leather cover worn from use. My hands shook as I opened it, flipping through the pages filled with Ollie's neat, flowing handwriting. But as I read, the words grew increasingly erratic, the pen strokes uneven and rushed. Place names, times, scraps of phrases that barely made sense. My eyes caught on one line written in bold, jagged letters. "Protect Dad." My breath hitched, and I pressed a hand to my mouth to keep from crying out. Nathaniel was beside me in an instant, his hand on my back. "What is it?" I turned the diary so he could see. His jaw tightened as he scanned the page, his eyes darkening. "Protect me," he murmured. "Why? What did he see?" "I don't know," I whispered, my voice breaking. But he was scared, Kai. He was so scared. Kai knelt by the bed, his head bowed, and for a moment I saw his walls crack. His shoulders shook once, but he didn't let the grief fully consume him. He couldn't. Neither of us could. "We'll bring him home," he said firmly, rising to his feet. His voice had that edge of steel I'd always admired, even when I felt like falling apart. "We'll find him, Bella, and when we do, we'll make Harper pay." I nodded, holding on to his strength. First, we need to figure out where he went. But before we could piece together more clues, the sound of hurried footsteps echoed through the hallway below. A moment later, Lennon burst into the room, his face pale, his eyes wide. "The boarder's falling," he gasped, gripping the door frame for support. "They're coming in waves. Father and the others are barely holding them back." The words hit like a physical blow, and for a moment the room spun. Kai cursed under his breath, his jaw clenching. "How bad?" Lennon shook his head, his voice trembling. "Bad. Worse than anything we've seen. These things, they're rotting, Bella. Like corpses, but they don't stop. It's like they're being controlled." Harper's reach was everywhere. Every piece of this nightmare tied back to her. She was like a wraith just looking to destroy everything standing in her way. Kai turned to me, his expression torn. "We can't ignore this, Bella. If the border falls, the pack falls." I knew he was right, but the thought of splitting up now, of leaving Ollie's safety hanging in the balance, made my heart ache. Still, we didn't have a choice. "We need a plan," I said, forcing my voice to steady. "Something that lets us handle both threats. Harper's puppets are everywhere. If we don't act strategically, we'll lose everything." Kai's eyes softened, and he cupped my cheek briefly, his touch grounding me. "We'll figure it out, together." We gathered in the war room an hour later, the tension in the air thick enough to choke on. Ralph and Amelia were already there, their faces grim as they listened to Lennon's report. The map of the territory spread out across the table was dotted with markers showing the monster's incursions. "They're targeting weak points," Ralph said, tracing the line of the border with his finger. "It's calculated. They're trying to force us into retreat. Which means Harper's watching," Amelia added. Her voice was calm, but there was a fire in her eyes. Kai leaned forward, his hand braced on the table. "Then we hit her where she doesn't expect. Lennon and I will take reinforcements to the border. We'll bolster the defenses and make sure it holds." "And what about Ollie?" I asked, my voice sharp. Kai met my gaze, his determination unwavering. "You and Ralph will rally the other Alpha packs, gather troops and supplies, then you'll find Ollie." I didn't want to be away from him, but I knew this was the best course of action. Still, the thought of leaving Kai to face whatever horror waited at the border gnawed at me. Amelia nodded. "We'll send messengers ahead to the nearby packs. They need to know what's happening and be ready to move." Ralph folded his arms, his expression grim. "It won't be easy to convince them. Some of them still don't trust the alliance." "Then I'll make them trust it," I said firmly. "This isn't just about our pack, it's about all of us. If Harper wins, no one is safe." The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of the situation pressing down on all of us. Finally, Kai spoke, his voice low but resolute. "We'll split our forces, but we won't falter. We'll find Ollie, we'll hold the border, and we'll end this." I nodded, gripping his hand tightly. Together. Even as I said it, a part of me wondered if we were ready for the storm that was coming. KAI. The tires hummed against the asphalt, their low rumble filling the cabin of the black SUV as we sped down the highway. The road stretched ahead in a seemingly endless ribbon, flanked by dense pine forests on either side. The sunlight filtered through the trees, casting fleeting patterns of light and shadow on the windshield. Lennon was in the passenger seat, fiddling with the GPS like it was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. His dark, chestnut hair was a little disheveled from the rush to leave, and his expression hovered between amused and annoyed as he jabbed at the touchscreen. "Tell me again why you're driving and not letting me?" he asked, finally giving up on the GPS. "Because I have control issues," I said flatly, glancing at him. "And because the last time you drove according to your sister, you nearly ran the car into a ditch trying to avoid a raccoon." "That raccoon had a death wish," Lennon shot back, smirking. "I saved its furry little life." "And nearly ended ours in the process," I replied dryly. He snorted, leaning back in his seat. "Fine, Alpha Control Freak, have it your way. At least I can sit back and enjoy the ride. This thing's got heated seats, right?" I rolled my eyes but didn't answer. Lennon wasn't exactly what I'd call relaxing company, but at least he wasn't sulking about being dragged to the border. Yet. "So," he said after a moment, his tone shifting to something more conversational. "How's married life treating you? You and Bella seem cozy." I didn't miss the teasing edge in his voice, and I knew exactly where this was going. Lennon had been part of the group of guys who'd relentlessly mocked me during that beach trip a few years ago, when I'd been having issues with Bella, when we were so close to ending our relationship surly and apparently a perfect target. How they didn't believe in me. How they thought I was terrible, and in hindsight I was, but I changed, and that was enough for Bella. But their approval meant a lot to me. I smirked, deciding to lean into the moment. "Oh, it's better than you could ever imagine," I said, my tone dripping with smug satisfaction. "Bella spoils me, Lennon. Breakfast in bed, coffee exactly how I like it, and even packs my lunch when I'm heading out for a long day." Lennon raised an eyebrow, his lips twitching like he was trying to hold back a grin. "Yeah? Lunch, huh? What, does she write little love notes on the napkins, too?" "She does, actually," I said, keeping my tone serious. "Last week she wrote, 'My dearest Kai, conquer the day as you conquer my heart.'" Lennon burst out laughing, shaking his head. "There's no way. You're full of it." I shrugged, fighting back my own grin. "Believe what you want, but I've got it pretty good." "Man, that's not fair," Lennon said, leaning back with a mock groan. "I'm out here dodging rotting monsters on the border, and you're living the dream with a wife who packs you lunches and writes you poetry. You should have been nicer to me at the beach," I said, giving him a pointed look. "Maybe I won't have to rub it in now." Lennon chuckled, shaking his head. Okay, I deserve that one, but you were a right-ass prick." We lapsed into a companionable silence for a while, the scenery outside shifting as the road wound deeper into the wilderness. The pines thinned in places, revealing stretches of rocky hills and clear blue skies. It was beautiful, in a stark, untamed way. "So," I said eventually, glancing at Lennon, "what's your story? You've been running the pack for years, but I don't know much about you beyond the bad driving and terrible jokes." For Bella, I would make this relationship with her family work. Lennon leaned his head back against the seat, his expression softening. Not much to tell. Grew up in the pack, same as you as son of the Alpha. You understand, don't you? I guess I've always felt like it's my job to protect it, you know? My family's been warriors for generations. My dad, my grandfather, they were both amazing alphas, and I have to do it. It's kind of in my blood. Must have been a lot to live up to, I said, my tone quieter. It was. Lennon's voice held a hint of something heavier, something I didn't expect from him. But I don't mind. I like what I do. And if I can keep people safe, if I can make sure no one has to lose someone they care about because of those things out there, then it's worth it. I glanced at him, a newfound respect settling in. Lennon wasn't just the jokester I'd always pegged him as. He cared deeply about what he did. Well, I said, breaking the silence with a faint smirk, if we make it out of this mess alive, I'll buy you a drink, maybe two. Deal, Ryan said, grinning again. And if you ever let me drive, I'll even let you pick the bar. Not a chance, I replied, laughing. The road stretched ahead in a seamless band of asphalt, flanked by tall pines that reached for the sky. The shadows of the trees danced across the car's hood, shifting with the angle of the sun. Lennon had taken over driving while I lounged in the passenger seat, letting the hum of the engine and the sway of the car soothe the tension in my shoulders. For a while, the only sound was the faint static of the radio and the occasional rustle of paper as I flipped through a map. Then Lennon cleared his throat, breaking the silence. You ever think about what it would have been like if we weren't born into this? He asked, his tone casual, but his words heavy. I glanced at him, caught off guard. You mean being an alpha? Having all these expectations hanging over us? Yeah, he said, his hands steady on the wheel. Sometimes I wonder what life would have been like if I'd just been normal. No pack, no territory to defend, no monsters at the border. Just simple. I chuckled dryly. I don't think you and I were built for simple, Lennon. Can you imagine yourself working a 9-to-5 job, wearing a suit and tie every day? He laughed, shaking his head. No way. I'd probably end up getting fired for showing up late or refusing to sit through boring meetings. But still, sometimes I envy the freedom other people have, you know? I nodded, leaning back against the seat. Yeah, I get that. Growing up, it felt like every decision I made wasn't really mine. It was about what was best for the pack, what would make me a good alpha. I couldn't just be. Lennon was quiet for a moment, his eyes fixed on the road. Same here. My dad is the kind of alpha who doesn't believe in excuses. He drilled it into me from the time I could walk. Duty first, always. And I tried to live up to that, but sometimes I felt like I wasn't enough. You're more than enough, I said, surprising even myself with the conviction in my voice. Lennon glanced at me, his expression softening. Thanks, man. The silence returned, comfortable now, until Lennon spoke again, this time with a small smile tugging at his lips. You know, when we found Bella, it was the first time I saw my dad cry. Like, really cry. The kind where he couldn't even talk. I turned to him, curious. I didn't know that. Lennon's grip on the wheel tightened, his voice taking on a wistful tone. Yeah, she was just this tiny thing, wrapped up in a blanket, but she had these big, curious eyes. My dad picked her up, and it was like all the weight he carried just melted away. She wasn't just our sister. She was hope, you know? A reminder that good things could still happen before she was snatched away from us. It was all too much. Too much for all of us, especially Mum. I swallowed hard, the image of a young Bella so vivid in my mind it almost hurt. She was lucky to have you, I said quietly. Lennon laughed, though there was no bitterness in it. We were the lucky ones. She brought life back to our family. But I'll be honest, Kai, when you came into the picture, I wanted to rip your head off. I winced, though I couldn't blame him. I deserved it. Yeah, you did, he said bluntly, glancing at me with a smirk. You were such a, how do I put this nicely, prick, treating her like she was some kind of obligation instead of the best thing that ever happened to you. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. I didn't know how to handle it. All my life, I'd been trained to think of everything in terms of responsibility and strategy. Marriage was just another part of that. Mabel did a number on me. She took everything, made me crumble. Until what? Lennon pressed, his tone softer now. Until I almost lost her, I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. That first fight we had, I thought I'd ruined everything. But she's stubborn, and she didn't give up on me, even when I didn't deserve it. She showed me what love actually looks like. Lennon was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the horizon. When he spoke again, his voice was low but steady. I hated you for a long time, you know. I thought you were going to break her, but then I saw how she looked at you, how happy she was, and I realized maybe you weren't such a bad guy after all. I smiled faintly, a flicker of gratitude warming my chest. Thanks, Lennon. That means a lot. Don't let it go to your head, he said with a grin, the tension in the air dissolving. You're still a pain in the ass. Fair enough, I replied, chuckling. Lennon suddenly glanced at me, his grin widening. So, when are you going to stop dodging my questions and tell me when I get to be an uncle? I choked on a laugh, caught off guard. Whoa, slow down. We've got enough on our plates without throwing a baby into the mix. Come on, Ryan said, nudging my arm. You and Bella would make adorable kids. Just picture a mini version of you running around, bossing everyone around like he owns the place. That sounds like a nightmare, I said, shaking my head. Well, if you're not going to give me nieces or nephews, I guess I'll have to do it myself, Lennon said dramatically. Good luck with that, I said, smirking. Who's the lucky woman? Lennon groaned, slouching in his seat. No one yet. I think all the women in the pack are scared of me, or maybe they just know I'm a disaster waiting to happen. You're not a disaster, I said, though I couldn't resist adding, you're just a project, a work in progress. Gee, thanks, he said, rolling his eyes. We both laughed, the kind of easy, unguarded laughter that felt rare these days. As the road stretched on, the conversation shifted to lighter topics, old stories, ridiculous jokes, and the occasional teasing comment. But beneath it all was a growing sense of understanding, a bond that hadn't been there before. For the first time, I felt like I truly knew Leno, not just as a warrior or a brother-in-law, but as a friend. And as the border loomed closer, I knew that no matter what waited for us there, we'd face it together. As we rounded a bend in the road, the first signs of the border came into view. The trees thinned further, revealing the rugged terrain that marked the pack's boundary. Guard towers stood like sentinels against the horizon, their silhouettes stark against the bright sky. Even from a distance, I could feel the tension in the air, the faint hum of unease that came with knowing danger was close. Lennon leaned forward, his playful demeanor giving way to something more serious. Looks like we're almost there. Yeah, I said, gripping the wheel a little tighter. Let's make sure we're ready for whatever's waiting for us. Despite the weight of what lay ahead, I felt a strange sense of comfort. Maybe it was the banter, the shared humor in the face of uncertainty, or maybe it was the realization that, for all his quirks, Lennon had my back. And as we crossed the threshold into the borderlands, I knew we'd need that trust more than ever. Bella. The room was filled with the heavy scent of oak, leather, and tension. The round table in the center was surrounded by the most powerful alphas in the region, each exuding their own brand of authority. Their voices rose and fell in heated arguments, the weight of their distrust hanging in the air like a thundercloud. Kai and I stood at the head of the table, flanked by Ralph, whose usually calm demeanor had slipped into something more rigid. I could feel Kai's energy beside me, coiled and ready to strike, and I knew it wouldn't take much to set him off as ridiculous. Snapped Alpha Conrad, a burly man with graying hair and a perpetual sneer. You expect us to believe this nonsense about witches and ancient werewolves? Sounds like a convenient excuse to expand your influence, Kai. Agreed, chimed in Alpha Leona, her voice sharp enough to cut. She leaned back in her chair, her arms crossed, her dark eyes fixed on us with open suspicion. Why should we risk our warriors on some fairy tale? The border has held for decades without your interference. Kai's jaw tightened, and I could see the faintest twitch in his temple, a clear sign he was losing patience. I rested a hand on his arm, but he didn't look at me. We're not asking for blind faith, Kai said, his voice low and controlled, though it carried a dangerous edge. We're presenting facts. The attacks have increased. Packs are losing members, warriors, entire families. Or are you going to ignore the reports from your own scouts, Conrad? Conrad slammed a hand on the table, making the other alphas jump. Don't you dare lecture me, boy. I've been leading my pack since before you could walk. I don't need you to tell me how to defend my territory. Then maybe you should start acting like it, Kai shot back, his voice rising. Kai, I said softly, a warning laced in my tone. He ignored me, stepping forward, his presence like a storm threatening to break. You sit there, clinging to your pride while your people are dying. If you think for a second I'll let anyone stand in the way of protecting my pack. Enough. My voice cut through the room like a blade. Kai turned to me, his expression dark, but I held his gaze until he relented, stepping back with a frustrated growl. I stepped forward, facing the alphas. Let me make one thing clear, I began, my voice steady but laced with steel. This isn't about territory or power or your wounded egos. This is about survival. And if you're too blind or too stubborn to see that, then you've already failed your packs. Leona narrowed her eyes on me. You expect us to believe you're doing this out of the goodness of your heart, Luna? Don't insult our intelligence. I met her gaze without flinching. Believe what you want, Leona, but while you sit here questioning my motives, your people are being turned into puppets for witches. They're losing their lives, their free will. Is that a risk you're willing to take because you don't like me or my husband? The room fell silent, the weight of my words sinking in. I turned to Conrad, my voice softer but no less firm. And you, Conrad, you talk about defending your territory, but how long will your borders hold if the witches come for you? How long before your warriors are outnumbered, outmatched? Can you afford to gamble on being wrong? Conrad's lips pressed into a thin line, but he didn't respond. I took a deep breath, letting my ability reach out, brushing against the tangled web of thoughts and emotions in the room. Fear, anger, doubt, all of it swirling together. But beneath it all there was something else. Hope. A faint, fragile thread, but enough to build on. You're all afraid, I said, addressing the room as a whole. I get it, I'm afraid too, but fear won't protect your packs. Unity will. We're stronger together than we are divided. You don't have to trust me or Nathaniel, but trust your instincts. Trust the love you have for your people. Because if we don't fight together, we won't stand a chance. Leona's gaze softened, and I could see the wheels turning in her mind. Conrad shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his bluster fading into something more contemplative. The meeting had only just started to settle, but the tension in the room still simmered beneath the surface, like embers waiting to ignite. Despite the alpha's grudging agreement to unite, skepticism lingered in their eyes. Their wariness wasn't surprising. Trust was fragile in the world of dominance and power plays. Still, it was grating. Leona was the first to speak up again, her sharp tone cutting through the murmurs. Unity is all well and good in theory, but let's get one thing straight. If this alliance fails, whose pack bears the brunt of the consequences? Yours, Kai? Or do we all take the fall for following your lead? Kai stiffened, and I felt his energy shift beside me. He didn't like anyone questioning his authority, let alone his intentions. We're not here to assign blame, he said, his voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of irritation. The stakes are too high for that kind of thinking, Leona. Oh, come on, scoffed Conrad, leaning forward, his arms braced against the table. You expect us to believe that your pack hasn't positioned itself as the linchpin in this? Look at you, young, newly mated, with the largest pack. It's hard not to assume you're trying to secure your dynasty under the guise of protecting us. Kai's lips curled in a faint snarl, but I put a hand on his forearm before he could speak. My touch was light but firm, a silent message. Let me handle this. I took a step forward, addressing the room. You think this is about building a dynasty? I asked, my voice cool and measured. Let me tell you what it's really about. Survival. The witches aren't going to stop. The ancient werewolves won't hesitate to tear through your borders, your homes, your families. If you want to sit there and debate politics while your packs burn, that's your choice. But don't mistake our determination to fight for an ulterior motive. Leona narrowed her eyes. It's hard to separate the two, Luna. Your rise to power has been sudden. And let's not forget the rumors of your abilities. How do we know we're not just pawns in your game? I locked eyes with her, unflinching. You don't trust me. Fine. But you trust your people, don't you? Do you trust that they deserve protection, no matter the cost? That's what this alliance is about. Not me, not Kai, them. There was a flicker of doubt in Leona's expression, but before she could respond, another Alpha spoke up. "I have to ask," said Alpha Gregor, his voice heavy with suspicion. "What makes you so sure these witches are as dangerous as you claim? You talk about ancient werewolves like they're an army waiting at the border, but we've seen no proof, just stories and scattered attacks." "Proof?" Kai growled, finally unable to hold back. He stepped forward, his presence commanding, but I quickly intercepted him with a firm glance. I turned to Gregor, my tone sharp but steady. "How much proof do you need? Dozens of packs have already fallen victim, members turned into puppets, their minds stripped away, families torn apart. Do you want to wait until your pack is next to believe it's real?" Gregor's mouth opened, but no words came out. The weight of my words hung heavy in the air. Luna Ivana, a quiet woman with piercing blue eyes, spoke up next. "And what of your abilities, Luna Bella? People talk about how you can sense emotions, manipulate thoughts. How can we trust someone with that kind of power?" The question struck a nerve, but I kept my expression neutral. "My abilities don't make me a threat, Ivana. They make me an asset. I use them to protect, not to control. If you're worried about being manipulated, ask yourself this. Has anything I've said here today felt false? Or do your fears stem from your own insecurities?" A murmur rippled through the room. Ivana's lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't respond. "Enough of this," Kai said, his voice firm and authoritative. He stepped forward again, his gaze sweeping the room. "You're all so focused on finding reasons not to trust us that you're losing sight of the real threat. If you want to question our motives, fine, but do it after we've dealt with the witches, after we've ensured the survival of our people." His words carried weight, silencing the room for a moment, but it wasn't long before Conrad spoke again. "And what happens after that?" he asked, his tone loaded with implication. "Once the threat is gone, how do we know your pack won't turn on us next? Consolidate power under the guise of maintaining order?" Kai's temper flared, and I could feel the heat of his anger radiating off him. He took a step toward Conrad, his voice a dangerous growl. "Say that again, and I'll—" "Kai." My voice cut through his anger like a whip. He froze, his jaw clenching as he looked at me. I stepped in front of him, my gaze locking with Conrad's. "Let me make one thing clear," I said, my voice cold as steel. "We don't need to turn on you to maintain order. If you want to be paranoid about every choice we make, that's your prerogative. But while you're busy spinning conspiracy theories, remember this. The witches aren't going to wait for you to get your act together. Every second you waste questioning our motives is a second closer to your pack's destruction." Conrad scowled, but said nothing. I turned to the rest of the room, my gaze sweeping over the gathered alphas and lunas. "This alliance isn't about trust. It's about necessity. You don't have to like us. You don't even have to respect us. But you will fight alongside us, or you'll face the consequences alone. The choice is yours." For a long moment, the room was silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Then Leona leaned back in her chair, her expression begrudgingly impressed. "Well, Luna," she said, a faint smirk tugging at her lips, "you've certainly got away with words." "I don't need your compliments," I said, my tone flat. "I need your cooperation." Leona nodded, her smirk fading. "Fair enough." One by one, the other alphas and lunas murmured their agreement. The resistance in their expressions didn't disappear entirely, but it softened enough to show that they understood the stakes. As the meeting finally began to shift toward planning and strategy, Kai leaned in close to me, his voice low. "You handled that better than I ever could have." I gave him a small, tired smile. "It's not about who handles it better. It's about getting the job done." And for the first time since the meeting began, I felt like we were on the same page. Ralph stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "You've all heard the reports. You've seen the evidence. Bella's right. We can't afford to be divided now. This isn't about who leads or who holds the most power. It's about survival, about protecting what we've built." There was a long silence, the tension in the room finally starting to ebb. Leona leaned forward, her elbows on the table. "If we agree to this alliance, what's the plan?" I nodded, glad to see her coming around. "First, we deal with the immediate threat, the witches and the ancient werewolves attacking packs. We protect our unawakened members from being turned into puppets. Once we've stabilized the borders, we can focus on eliminating the witch's influence entirely. Conrad frowned, but there was no fire in his expression anymore. And who's leading this effort? We'll do it together, I said firmly. Every alpha contributes. Every pack plays a role. This isn't about one pack taking control. It's about all of us surviving. The room was quiet again, but this time the silence felt different, like the storm had passed, leaving something steady in its wake. Leona sighed, running a hand through her hair. Fine, I'm in. But if this turns out to be a mistake, don't expect me to go easy on you. Noted, I said, a faint smile tugging at my lips. One by one, the other alphas nodded their agreement, some grudgingly, others with quiet determination. As the meeting came to a close, Kai leaned in close to me, his voice low. You handled that better than I would have. I smirked, glancing up at him. That's because you were too busy trying to scare them into submission. Worked, didn't it? He muttered, though there was a hint of pride in his tone. I shook my head, the weight of the meeting settling in. This was just the beginning, but at least we were moving forward. Together, Bella. The forest stood before me like a black maw, its dense trees weaving a near impenetrable canopy that blocked out the moonlight. The ruins forest. Even saying the name aloud was enough to send shivers down the spine of most wolves. Abandoned for a century, it had become forbidden ground, a cursed reminder of the blood spilled during the pack wars. I stared into its depths, the diary clutched tightly in my hands. Ollie's notes had been clear. This was the first location to investigate. Still, a voice in the back of my mind whispered, Evelyn wouldn't put her base in such an obvious place. My wolf stirred uneasily. You don't have to do this alone. I shook my head, setting the diary into my pack. I'll be fine. Shifting into my wolf form, I padded forward, ears perked and senses on high alert. The stench hit me immediately, a vile mix of decay and something sour, chemical almost. I paused, my hackles rising as the air grew heavy around me. Every step deeper into the forest felt like entering another world. The ground was damp and spongy beneath my paws, and twisted roots jutted out like jagged teeth. The trees themselves seemed alive, their gnarled branches clawing at the sky. I froze as a sound reached me, a low, guttural howl, distant but filled with pain. My wolf growled softly, warning me to leave, but I pressed on. Soon, the source of the smell came into view, a clearing littered with remains. I stepped into the open, shifting back to human form for a closer look. The bodies' remnants were in various stages of decay, some stripped to the bone, others barely clinging to fur. The ground beneath them was dark, saturated with old blood. Moon above, I whispered, fighting the urge to gag. But what caught my attention most were the markings on the surrounding trees. They were deliberate, etched deep into the bark. They reminded me of ancient runes, though I couldn't read them. They gave off a faint glow that set my nerves on edge. I crouched near one of the bodies, careful not to disturb it. Deep gashes marked its sides, as though it had been attacked by claws, but there was something unnatural about the wounds. They seemed to pulse faintly, as though still alive. My thoughts were interrupted by another howl, this one closer. My wolf bristled, urging me to shift and run, but my curiosity held me still. Then came the sound of movement, branches snapping, leaves rustling. Something was coming. I didn't wait to find out what. Shifting mid-motion, I sprinted from the clearing, weaving through the trees with practiced ease. My lungs burned as I pushed myself faster, desperate to put distance between me and whatever lurked in the shadows. The howls followed me, growing louder, more agonized. By the time I broke through the tree line and into the open, the moonlight felt like salvation. I collapsed onto the ground, panting heavily, my heart hammering in my chest. Evelyn's presence was everywhere in that forest. I was certain of it. The stench, the runes, the howls, all of it was her handiwork. By the time I returned to the council chamber, the others were waiting. Ralph and Lennon stood side by side, their broad shoulders blocking part of the view. Kai leaned casually against a stone pillar, arms crossed and an air of calm surrounding him. His sharp green eyes tracked me the moment I walked in. Leona and Amelia sat nearby, the former with her ever-sharp gaze, and the latter resting a hand protectively over her growing belly. They all turned to me as I entered, their expressions a mix of curiosity and concern. "Bella," Ralph said, his tone clipped. What did you find? I stepped forward, feeling the weight of their attention. The first location in Ollie's diary, Ruins Forest. It's exactly what we feared. Lennon frowned. You actually went in there? Yes, I said firmly. And you'll want to hear what I found. Lennon stepped forward, his dark eyes narrowing as he loomed closer. You think you can just run into the Ruins Forest, risk your life, and drag the rest of us into whatever death trap you found without consulting anyone? Are you out of your mind, Bella? I clenched my fists at my sides, barely able to contain the anger bubbling up. I wasn't dragging anyone into anything, Lennon. I went alone because I had to. None of you would have listened if I suggested it before going. You had no right, he snapped, his voice echoing off the stone walls of the chamber. You could have gotten yourself killed, and for what? Some scribbled notes in a diary? Harper isn't stupid, Bella. She wants us to fall into her traps. I had every right, I shot back, stepping up to him until we were nearly nose to nose. You weren't the one who found Ollie's diary. You weren't the one who's been putting in the work to figure out what she's planning. I was. So don't you dare stand here and tell me I should have done nothing. You think you're the only one who cares about this pack? Lennon growled, his shoulders tense. The only one willing to fight for them? You're reckless, Bella. You always have been, and it's going to get you, or worse, one of us killed. He was worried, scared for me, but I didn't care when Ollie, my son, was in danger. It didn't matter. His words cut deep, but I refused to let him see it. Instead, I squared my shoulders and met his glare head-on. I'm reckless because I do care. I went into that forest because I knew none of you would. Someone had to, Lennon. Someone had to see what she's doing. Or do you think ignorance will keep us safe? You don't get it, do you? He threw up his hands, pacing in frustration. We're supposed to work together, not charge in headfirst without a plan. Don't lecture me about teamwork, I said, my voice cold. Where was all this working together energy when Ollie was kidnapped? When I was the only one who thought to look through his notes? You were too busy being angry to do anything useful. That hit a nerve. Lennon's face darkened, his jaw tightening as he glared at me. Don't you dare bring Ollie into this. Why not? I challenged, my voice rising. Because it's easier for you to pretend he's just another casualty? Well, I'm not pretending, Lennon. I'm doing something about it. Enough! Ralph's voice boomed across the chamber, silencing both of us. I turned to see my eldest brother standing with his arms crossed, his expression a mix of disappointment and exhaustion. You two are acting like pups fighting over a bone. This isn't the time for personal grudges. He started it, I muttered, though my voice lacked the venom it had before. And you escalated it, Ralph shot back. He looked at Lennon, then at me. I get it. Both of you are frustrated, scared, and angry. But none of that is going to help us deal with Evelyn. You're on the same side, whether you like it or not. Lennon let out a sharp exhale, his shoulders relaxing slightly. He glanced at me, his expression still tense but less combative. Fine, but next time, Bella, we make a plan before anyone charges into danger. Understood? I hesitated, still burning with the need to argue, but Ryan's gaze pinned me in place. I sighed. Understood. Kai, who had been silent until now, stepped closer. His calm voice cut through the lingering tension. We've all made mistakes, but Bella's right about one thing. If Harper is using the Ruins Forest, we can't ignore it. The question now is, what's our next move? Ralph nodded, his tone firm. We regroup, we plan, and we do this together. No more solo missions. Agreed? Agreed, I muttered, though the sting of Lennon's words still lingered. Lennon gave a stiff nod, then turned and walked away, leaving the room without another word. Kai glanced at me, his eyes softening. Don't let him get to you, he said quietly. I shrugged, though his words offered some comfort. He's always been good at getting under my skin. Kai's lips twitched in the faintest hint of a smile. You've always been good at standing your ground. Right. I wanted to smile, but I couldn't when he was missing. It didn't feel right. Had he eaten? Had he slept? Was he okay? Did he have a bed? I swallowed a lump in my throat. Kai raised an eyebrow, his voice smooth but laced with tension. Well then, go on, Bella. Don't keep us waiting. I took a deep breath, recounting every detail. The forest is wrong. The air is heavy. The ground reeks of decay. I found a clearing full of bodies wolves, though it's hard to say which pack they belonged to. The trees around them were marked with strange runes, glowing faintly. And then there were the howls. Amelia shuddered. What kind of howls? Broken, I said, my voice quieter now. Agonized, like they were in pain. They didn't sound natural. Could it be a trap? Lennon asked, his arms crossed. Possibly, I admitted. But the bodies, they were real. Whatever's happening there, it's not just a decoy. And you think Harper's behind this? Connor asked, his expression unreadable. Yes, I said without hesitation. It matches her patterns, manipulating fear, experimenting on wolves, and using forbidden places to hide her work. Leona nodded thoughtfully. Hiding in the ruins forest is bold. She knows we'd hesitate to go there because of its history. Which is exactly why we have to act, I said. If she's using that forest as a base, or worse, as a testing ground, we can't ignore it. And what do you propose? Kai asked, his gaze piercing. We need to investigate further, I said. We need a team to go back, gather more evidence, and... No, Ralph interrupted, his tone firm. You've done enough. You're not going back in there. I glared at him. I'm the one who found it. I know what to look for. They needed to understand what I was going through. My son is in danger. I took a step forward, eyes hardened. Do you have any idea what that is like? To lose a part of your family? Yes. Yes, I do, Bella. His jaw was clenched. He lost me. The realization washed over me like an ice bucket being splashed on me. Fuck. You've already risked your life once, Ralph said. We'll send scouts, volunteers only. But you're staying here. Kai straightened, his voice calm but commanding. I'll lead the team. What? I turned to him, startled. You've given us plenty to go on, he said. If there's danger in that forest, I'll handle it. Ralph nodded. Agreed. Kai, you'll take point. My fists clenched, but I forced myself to stay silent. They were right. Charging back in so soon would be reckless. I'll help coordinate, I said finally, my voice tight. Good, Ralph said. We'll regroup tomorrow and plan the next steps. As the meeting ended, Kai stepped closer, his voice low. You did well, Bella. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I nodded, his words a small comfort. But as I left the chamber, the memories of the forest clung to me like a shadow. Harper was planning something terrible, and I could feel it. And stopping her would demand everything we had. All I hoped was that Ollie wouldn't get caught in the mix of everything. I sighed, pinching the bridge of my nose, shoulders slumping. All that mattered was that I told the packs. I explained to them what had happened, and that it was important, wise, and smart. The next steps? I didn't know, but Ollie had to be safe. K.I. I leaned against the stone wall, my arms crossed as I listened to Alpha Luther's concerns about the recent attacks. We need to increase our patrols and gather more intel on the enemy's movements, Luther said, his voice firm. Lennon nodded in agreement. I've been thinking the same thing, Alpha. We can't keep reacting to these attacks. We need to take the initiative. I agree, I said, pushing off the wall. But we also need to consider the possibility that these attacks are just a diversion. Harper's smart. She wouldn't launch a full-scale attack without a strategy. Alpha Luther's eyes narrowed. What are you suggesting, Kai? I'm saying we need to look deeper, I replied. What's Harper's endgame? What's she trying to achieve with these attacks? Lennon frowned. You think she's after something specific? I do, I said, and I think we need to figure out what that is if we're going to stop her. Alpha Luther rubbed his chin thoughtfully. I see what you're getting at, Kai, but we can't ignore the immediate threat. We need to defend our territory now. Just as it seemed like the conversation was going to escalate further, my beta burst into the room, looking frantic. Kai, we have a problem, he said, out of breath. One of our borders is under attack again. My gut tightened. Not again. I felt a surge of adrenaline as I stood up, my eyes locked on Alpha Luther. How many attackers? I asked my beta, already knowing the answer wouldn't be good. My beta hesitated. We're not sure yet, but our scouts report that they're well-armed and well-coordinated. Luther's face darkened. This is unacceptable. We need to take action now. I nodded, my jaw clenched. Agreed. Alpha, I request access to the pack's remaining weapons and ammunition. We need to defend our territory. Luther's eyes narrowed, and for a moment I thought he'd refuse. But then he nodded curtly. Very well. You may access the armory. But be warned, Kai. We can't afford to lose any more wolves. As we made our way to the armory, I could feel the weight of our situation settling in. We needed to act fast, and we needed to be prepared. The armory was a large, dimly lit room filled with rows of shelves and cabinets, all stocked with various types of weapons and gear. Bruce, our pack's quartermaster, stood behind a large desk, eyeing us warily. "Alpha Luther Chi Lennon," he said, his voice neutral. "What can I help you with?" "We need access to our more advanced weaponry," I said, scanning the shelves. Bruce raised an eyebrow. "You mean the heavy artillery?" I nodded. "Yes, we need something that can give us an edge against Harper's forces." Alpha Luther cleared his throat. "Kai, I don't think that's necessary. We should be focusing on strategy and stealth, not brute force." I turned to him, frowning. "With all due respect, Alpha, I disagree. We need to be prepared for anything, and if that means using more powerful weapons, then so be it." Luther's expression turned stern. "Kai, as supernatural creatures, we should fear nature, not try to dominate it. Using mass destruction weapons goes against everything we stand for." I felt a surge of frustration. "This isn't about dominating nature, Alpha. This is about survival. And if using those weapons means protecting our pack, then I'm willing to do it." The air was thick with tension as we stood there, locked in a silent stare-down. Bruce shifted uncomfortably, clearing his throat. "Perhaps we could compromise," he suggested. "There are other options available that might give us an edge without resorting to extreme measures." I hesitated, then nodded. "Fine, show me what we have." Bruce nodded, leading us to a section of the armory filled with an array of strange and exotic weapons. I scanned the shelves, my eyes narrowing as I considered our options. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than nothing. And right now, we needed every advantage we could get. Alpha Luther led the charge, his massive frame barreling forward as we clashed with the monsters. Lennon and I flanked him, our movements fluid and practiced. The air was thick with the stench of decay and corruption, and the ground beneath our feet was slick with V-weed, its noxious tendrils snaking around our ankles like living vines. I could feel its toxic energy seeping into my skin, but I pushed on, my focus locked on the battle ahead. The monsters were a twisted amalgamation of wolf and something else. Their bodies were distorted, elongated, and covered in razor-sharp spines. They moved with an unnatural, jerky gait, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly energy. Lennon took down the first monster with a swift kick to the chest, his claws flashing in the dim light. Alpha Luther followed up with a crushing blow, his massive paws swiping through the air with deadly precision. I darted between the two, my agility and quick reflexes allowing me to dodge the monster's clumsy attacks. My claws sliced through the air, striking true again and again as I wove between the enemy ranks. But despite our best efforts, the monsters just kept coming. They seemed endless, a tide of twisted flesh and razor-sharp claws that threatened to engulf us. Just as it seemed like we were gaining the upper hand, a monster lunged forward, its jaws wide open as it targeted Alpha Luther. He spun to face the attack, his paws raised in defense, but the monster was too fast. It was about to sink its teeth into Luther's exposed flank when I saw my chance. With a swift strike, I knocked the monster off balance, sending it crashing to the ground. But as I turned to face the next attacker, I felt a searing pain in my side. One of the monsters had landed a lucky blow, its claws raking across my ribs. Alpha Luther saw my stumble and immediately sprang into action. He positioned himself between me and the monsters, his massive frame shielding me from harm. But as he did, one of the monsters saw its chance. It lunged forward, its jaws wide open as it targeted Luther's exposed throat. The monster's jaws closed around Alpha Luther's throat, and I felt a surge of adrenaline-fueled rage. But as I watched in horror, I saw that the monster's teeth were coated in a dark, tar-like substance. The blood that flowed from Luther's wound was a deep, almost black shade of red, and I knew that the monster's venom was at work. "Fall back!" I shouted to the others, my voice carrying across the battlefield. "Protect yourselves!" The pack members and our allies quickly formed a defensive perimeter, shielding themselves from the poisonous monster's attacks. I stood tall, my eyes locked on the monster as I growled, baring my teeth. The battle raged on, but our defensive stance allowed us to gain the upper hand. We managed to drive the monsters back, but at a great cost. As the dust settled, I rushed to Alpha Luther's side. He lay on the ground, his throat torn open, his eyes sunken. I could smell the poison coursing through his veins, and I knew that time was running out. Kai! Luther's voice was barely above a whisper. I'm here, Alpha, I said, my voice shaking with emotion. Luther's eyes fluttered open, and he looked up at me with a faint glimmer of recognition. My daughter, he whispered. I want to see her, one last time. My heart sank, and I felt a lump form in my throat. I knew that Luther's time was almost up, and I couldn't bear the thought of losing him. I'll bring her to you, Alpha, I promised, trying to keep my voice steady. Just hold on.